a personal crisis that I faced when I realized I know a lot of things about God and
Mhm.
I could tell other people about the Bible, but
Mm.
I'm not very good at following Jesus.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And getting more information by itself did not bring about transformation in my life.
Mhm. Well, it is no secret that we live in a broken and divided world. There are divisions and brokenness between nations, between political parties, between ideologies, between family members, right? And most of us carry some brokenness and dividedness, probably even within our own selves. And so, part of the work of ministry leadership is really sort of learning how to heal that brokenness inside ourselves so that we can contribute to healing of the brokenness in the world around us. In today's conversation, I'm talking with Mark Scandrette and Dave Kludt, who co-teach or are going to co-teach a Doctor of Ministry cohort at Fuller Seminary titled Spiritual Formation, Embodied and Integral Leadership for the 21st Century. And we talk about how do we do that work of inner life transformation so that we can do the work of outer life leadership in as healthy a way as possible. This is a really great conversation. I'm excited to bring it to you. I'm Marcus Watson, and this is episode 313 of Spiritual Life and Leadership. All right, well, I'm here with Mark Scandrette and Dave Kludt, and I'm very excited because, Mark, I just like hanging out with you. I think of you.
I like hanging out with you, Marcus.
Yeah, man. Actually, and you and I met when we did a podcast together. I had you for your book, what was it called? Ninefold Path, right?
Ninefold Path of Jesus.
That's right. That was the first time. And then we ended up walking the Camino together, and then we ended up hanging out on a friend's porch just a couple of months ago. And anyway, and we much more than that. Yeah. And then Dave, I'm looking forward to getting to know you a little bit today. We've never met before today.
Yeah.
But you guys teach a cohort together at Fuller Seminary in the Doctor of Ministry program. And let's just kind of start. How do you guys know each other? What's your connection with each other?
We go back, I think, till about 2010 or so. Mark, I can't remember the exact year. I had finished my MDiv at Fuller, and I was working at a small church in East Hollywood. And it was a bivocational ministry position where I was working with a team of pastors. And my other vocation was working at Fuller in the Doctor of Ministry office, actually. And our team was always kind of looking out for interesting books, interesting people, interesting conversations that we can be having as a team, and then inviting our students into as well. And a number of us were reading Mark's book, Practicing the Way of Jesus. And we said, he's in California, we're in California. Let's bring him down just to spend some time with our team and just kind of learn together and have a day-long conversation. And I think that was the start of kind of the collegial professional relationship. And then it kind of grew from there into something more at some point, mentor-protege relationship. And then we ended up both living in the San Francisco Bay Area. And then it kind of moved into more of a friendship.
Nice.
And now we get to work on this project together, which is really fun. So Mark, what's your recollection?
Yeah.
And Dave is the president of the board of my organization.
Oh.
And we have done a lot of great collaboration over the last, 8-10 years. And, we've done online labs for people around the Beatitudes and with a global audience. And so it's, he's one of my closest friends.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I love it. And you guys you partner together in terms of teaching and other things as well, maybe. But so tell us a little bit about, so you teach a cohort together at Fuller. What is the problem or the challenge or the struggle that you guys are addressing in that cohort?
I think there's a lot of interest right now in spiritual formation. It's language that's kind of entered into, the popular vernacular.
Yeah.
And what is challenging is to figure out how to actually experience formation and accompany others in that formation in a way that's embodied and holistic and really transformational. At the same time, I think pastors today have an impossible job to do, and I don't. I say that with a chuckle, but the expectations are so vast and broad and complex, and so spiritual formation, I think, has to wrestle with the complexity of life in the modern world and the big needs and issues and the crises that we see in our world today: growing inequality, ecological crisis, racism, sexism, etc. So we're calling it an integral approach to spiritual formation.
Right.
So how do we grapple with what's going on in the world, also know ourselves well, and then figure out, how do I design my life and my way of doing ministry in a way that really reflects the wholeness and the flourishing of the kingdom of God. So we really hope to accompany pastors and leaders with facing these questions of who am I, what's going on in the world, what does the way of Jesus invite us into that connects with all of these needs and longings that we have.
Yeah. Dave, anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I think that there was some conversation that Mark and I had about, what do we even call this cohort that we're guiding? We originally didn't land. We knew it was a spiritual formation cohort, but that wasn't immediately the title that we landed on. Because I think oftentimes it feels like spiritual formation in a church context is one arm or one wing or one compartment of a wider ministry. And you have whatever happens on Sunday, you have what happens with kids and teenagers and young adults. So you have like all the age group divisions, you have all the weekly divisions, and then spiritual formation is like this other thing that happens. And you need to have a plan or a process that one person on a multi-person staff might implement. I spent 15 years in pastoral ministry, and at some point realized that everything we do is formational. From the I've never been in a place where I haven't had to set up chairs. And the way you set up chairs impacts how people are engaging the space or the time of any kind of communal gathering. So literally, this, from the setup to the chairs to the content that's being communicated or visualized up on a screen, whether you have screens or not, is a formational decision. So really, I think what that says is that Mark and I want to talk about everything. We want to talk about all the little things that go into any kind of ministry leadership in a context, and really ask questions about, how is this impacting and forming and shaping people? How are they growing in the midst of all these things that we're putting in the soil around us? And then on top of that, you have everything that's happening in the world. And whether it's you just see it as a series of different crises, or an omni-crises, or a polycrises, or like terms that we've kind of engaged with and are being thrown around. There's something happening in the world right now that feels increasingly impossible to navigate unless you're kind of eyes wide open, in conversation with a lot of different people in a lot of different spheres. Because otherwise you're going to miss pieces of it, and you'll lose people in your community or in your context, because you're not speaking to the pain that they're experiencing, or the hurt that they're experiencing, or the confusion that they're trying to navigate. So really, we want to talk about everything, which is too much, but also to do otherwise feels like it's too compartmentalized. It's too narrow focused. We're zoomed in too far. And then we miss a lot of what God is up to in the world if we're just trying to be hyper focused on this specific program or this specific series of practices. So we really want to, we're starting the cohort kind of very zoomed out, big picture, what's happening in this moment in the world right now.
Well, okay. There's a lot happening in the world right now. You kind of touched on that. How do you, have you done the cohort yet, or is this going to be the first time?
This be I've taught segments of this course,
I see.
this cohort,
Yeah.
and this is as you probably know, Fuller's moved to a fully cohort based doctoral
Right.
program.
Right.
Um, instead of one-off courses on specific topics, like
Yeah.
I taught a course called Practicing the Way of Jesus, which was on
Right.
spiritual formation leadership.
Yeah.
And I taught another course on personality and spiritual
Yeah.
formation. So it's like taking the best
Yeah.
of those courses and adding to it. And I
Yeah.
think this is
Nice.
largely Dave's contribution is let's face reality head on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the missing leg on this
Yeah.
stool.
Well, I asked if you taught it before, just to see if you like how you've handled that before. What Dave was mentioning, the all the stuff that's happening in the world, wars and terrible things and political division in our country and in other countries, and just and it's I don't know if it's uglier than other times, but it feels uglier than other times, at least in my lifetime. And I know it's been much uglier at other times in history. But so how do you anticipate handling kind of the big picture, and then the tension between the wide and the narrow in terms of focus? Maybe Mark, you start, and then Dave, you can jump in one there.
Yeah. I mean, I think this really starts with an animating picture of the gospel. Jesus said, "The time has come, the kingdom of God is at hand." Rethink your whole life and believe this, walk in the reality that God is here, God cares, and God is making all things new.
Yeah.
So we're recognizing that Jesus' desire is to see all of creation renewed. And that includes the individual and our sense of identity, purpose, connections, and stewardship on planet Earth. And it involves every level of reality, our social connections, our political connections, our ways of interacting with creation. So I guess we're recognizing the inner and the outer. So if I look out on the world, whatever I see, my sense is whatever I see that feels broken and disturbing, it's a manifestation of the inner world of human beings.
Yeah.
And so I need to be transformed, have an encounter with God that transforms my inner reality.
Yeah.
And that helps me engage with the outer reality in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. Dave.
Yeah, and I think the language that keeps on coming back to me as I'm reading and thinking and just kind of watching what's happening in the world, watching how my kids are engaging the world is like we're in this moment of increasing fracture and increasing fragmentation. And it's true from everything from like, where do we get our news? Like anecdotally, back in the day, everyone would trust the nightly news.
Right.
We have these figments of history, Walter Cronkite or whatever, that was seen as so trustworthy, and everybody knew what was said in the news. And now we're at this point where like no one's getting their news from the same source. You can't even follow it back to a common source because it's like which micro platform are you tuned into to get your news? And the same feels like it's happening in churches. Denominations continue to splinter and fragment from just over the last hundreds of years. It's this increasing story of smaller and smaller fragmentations that grow into fractures. And I think the same is true on an individual level. It happens out in the world on a social level. It happens interpersonally in communities, and it happens in our souls too. That we are increasingly experiencing fragments, splinters, and fractures that are dividing us from each other, but also and from the world around us, but also dividing us from ourselves. This is one of the things I experience as a pastor. Is like I have this public life that is spoken about through a microphone or written about in a community-wide email. And then I just also have my honest wrestling with the world. And
Yeah.
there's a decision every single Sunday in my context about how much of my actual, how much of this guy do I share with those people gathered around.
Right.
And there's a toll that took on me. And I think there's a toll that takes when we're constantly trying to figure out how to navigate all of these splintered and fractured components of the world that we kind of assemble around us, whether it's the people we assemble around us, the world where we're getting our information, how we're navigating that, to just how are we dealing with ourselves as humans.
Yeah. And I imagine the words integral and embodied are kind of meant to kind of capture what you're trying to get at. Let me start with you this time, Dave. Talk about those two words, integral and embodied, that you guys use when you talk about what you're going to be teaching.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, like I was just saying, like we're more disconnected than we ever have been before.
Yeah.
And I grew up kind of with the rise of technology and with the rise of the internet, as a lot of us did. And the story that we were told is that it's going to bring us all together. That these devices, these networks are going to be so connective that in like the snap of a fingers, we're going to be able to communicate with someone across the world and feel so connected.
Yeah.
And instead, what's happened is that we're terribly disconnected. Increasingly so. All the statistics are showing that from psychological impacts to ecological impacts, like we are more disconnected and fractured than we ever have been before.
Yeah.
So when we talk about integral, it's really just like trying to open up our eyes as wide as possible to capture as much information as we possibly can from as many sources as possible, recognizing that there's so much to learn in the fields of neuroscience that have radically changed how we understand what's happening in our brains and how that impacts our experience of the world. And that is deeply connected with the message of Jesus. It's not like an interesting aside, but that it's actually part of this process of learning and discovery that is part of God's creation. To continue to explore and understand this thing that's happening in us and around us. So integrated approach is just a way of saying we want to learn from all sources. We want to be open to conversation with fields, including theology, of course, but also beyond theology, in a way that is able to integrate in and ask questions that help us understand what we can learn from those whose approach is different from us, or whose posture is different from us, or whose starting place is different from us.
Yeah. That's great. And then how about Mark, why don't you talk about embodied? What do you talk about embodied?
So there's what really animated my work starting about 20 some years ago was a personal crisis that I faced when I realized I know a lot of things about God and I could tell people about the Bible, but I'm not very good at following Jesus. And getting more information by itself did not bring about transformation in my life. And so I look at the end of the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus said, anyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is wise. So I think, especially because of what Dave said about technology, we have unprecedented access to information in our time that's almost overwhelming. And I think our impulses to collect more information actually take us away from the embodiment that would lead us into transformation. And so the work Dave and I have been a part of together is inviting people into relational and existential encounters where we grapple with the words of Jesus. Hey, do not worry, forgive, let go of your resentments. Well, how would we do that?
Right.
Let's give it a go. And so the premise is we learn by doing, not just by thinking. And in many other fields beyond theology, I think people have understood this embodied andragogy better than we have in the church,
Yeah.
and we're really suffering because of it.
Yeah.
Because we know we want to be like Jesus, we want to engage the problems of the world and our communities with compassion, but we're stuck in our heads.
Yeah.
So we need to have real honest encounters with one another. We need experiences with God. We need to be having firsthand experiences of the great aches in our world, not just read about things, but engage with affected people and land. And so this cohort's going to be a lot about those kind of, especially the in-person component, threshold experiences, and but also our bodies. I think there's a lot more awareness now of how much knowledge comes not just through this brain, but also through our heart intelligence and our gut, and the information that comes to our bodies that we need to pay attention to.
Yeah. So yes, I agree there. I think we are more aware of that. And yet I think a lot of pastors anyway are like, I just got to learn more stuff so I can say it better, and convince people of it better. So I'm going to read as many books as I can. I'm going to take as many classes and go to as many conferences as I can. And it's all about the head. So how do we get it? How do we integrate, I guess, the heart and the gut and the whole body? Well, how do you think about taking people through that process?
There's a couple tools that Dave and I have used a lot, and that our organization Reimagine uses a lot. One is a format we call the Learning Lab, where we take a certain theme or topic that connects with a human ache, and we say we explore it together experientially. What does Jesus have to say about this ache or this part of our lives? I just finished up a month with a group where we were looking at how we navigate suffering and being mistreated and the injustices that we faced in our lives. And so we kind of take several different approaches. We invite people to journal and reflect on that and share honestly with each other in a cohort about their experiences. We look at reframing our experiences of suffering, and thinking well about it. And then we invite people to take on daily practices, embodied practices that might help them metabolize their suffering in a different way. So it's a very intentional, hopefully holistic approach to learning. So when we meet, there's you're given homework to do, and then the next time we meet, it's not what did you read, it's what came up in your journal, what came up in your interactions with people when you tried that practice. What did you notice in your mind and body and heart? How did it affect your connections with other people? So there's a strong learning by doing component.
And I think a key piece of it.
Go ahead.
You go. I was going to say a key piece of that is that they're like a learning lab is led from within. The leader is a participant or a model or an exemplar, not just someone with all the book knowledge that they've garnered from reading or listening to more or learning more Greek and Hebrew original languages than everyone else in the community. So they're seen as the expert, but really is someone who is willing to go first, to ask their own questions in a group context, so that people are able to recognize, that you lead by example, with humility and a willingness to be wrong. I think that's another piece of these learning labs is like you learn through failure. That's true across the board in almost every field. but failing in a Christian context is seen as something that you really got to steer clear from, rather than recognizing that that is just part of the human process. Mark, you're going to say something else. What was it?
Yeah, well, so one of our values is we share the minimum viable amount of information, um, and then emphasize honesty in action,
Okay.
to balance out that quest for knowledge. Those who choose to be part of the cohort, part of their doctoral project would be designing a 6 to 8 week formation lab on a particular topic. And this is a part of the cohort that I've taught 5 or 6 times at Fuller already over the last 12 or 15 years. And it's really exciting to see students come up with really meaningful and relevant things to bring back to their communities that are a resource for formation, that are bespoke, designed for around the needs of people in their communities. Things like, well, I notice a lot of people feel being anxious in my community, so I created a lab around that. Or I noticed a lot of us feeling really overwhelmed and too busy, and so we are working on slowing down and living more connected lives. And so they're training towards perspectives and practices that might help with that challenge. The other component I think that's really helpful is spiritual companionship or spiritual direction. And so we're incorporating that into the cohort, both receiving it during the cohort, but also helping another person, like being their companion in their journey of asking these questions and trying to live in the reality of the kingdom of God.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I'm curious, Mark, having taught it, and just Dave having, been in ministry and around ministry leaders, how do people, how do students, how do pastors sort of respond to that invitation? To get out of their heads in a way. What kind of pushback do you get, if any, or are they like, "Oh, this is awesome. This is just what I need." Like, what kinds of responses do you get from people? I'd love to hear from both of you in terms of your experience.
I think a lot of students find it really refreshing.
Okay.
And a little jarring at first, but like, wow, the professor's leading with vulnerability here.
Right.
We're not just talking about books; we're talking about our lives and our questions and our aches together. But I've had many students say, I didn't expect to have such a heartfelt experience in an academic program that changed my life in the way it did.
That's awesome. Dave, what did you
I think I know what Mark is saying to be true. I also know just how complicated it is. I think about a very pivotal moment in my own ministry experience, where I had just come back from a short sabbatical. This was a little bit of the ways into kind of COVID restructuring of how church was operating. I was extremely exhausted, and came back from the sabbatical with new ideas, new vision, new imagination. And I was sitting down for coffee with one of our elders, and she was asking me about kind of hey, what are you coming back with? What are you excited about? And I started telling her a little bit about what I was really excited about. Hey, maybe we could think about things like this, and maybe we don't have to go back to the way things were in terms of this and that. Maybe we can start some things that are completely fresh and new. And she said, I think what everybody wants is what we used to have. And I think if we don't do what we used to have, I don't think people are going to stick around. And she was like alongside of me in my ideation, my imagination, and my excitement, and was just speaking honestly about there's so much pull towards the status quo,
Yeah.
which is shaped so much by kind of these models of success, of what success looks like, particularly in American evangelicalism, of what preaching sounds like, what worship music sounds like, what a Sunday gathering looks like. That if you're not doing the thing that everybody, the cultural imagination for church is pretty fixed. So to be invited to step out of that rhythm of what everybody who's looking for church is expecting to find, and to try to do something completely different, to reimagine what the role of a pastor in a Sunday gathering looks like, from kind of the person who holds the microphone and dispenses wisdom or knowledge of Scripture, to the person who leads with humility, asks more questions than they answer. It's jarring. And it is when we have these institutions, large or small, that we're trying to either preserve or grow or maintain health, stability. Rocking the boat is really complicated to do as a leader. So to be able to come into a cohort where there's a step outside of your ministry context, whether that's a nonprofit or a church or a parachurch, some other kind of ministry, and to be in this cohort context and be able to try some of these things out over the course of a couple of years, I think is a really valuable experience that can slowly begin to develop some of the skills and imagination for what it looks like to integrate a new way of leading, a new way of existing in your ministry setting.
Dave's sort of naming a tension that we have to address with participants is between the status quo and the what is normative measures of success, and then this more dangerously alive journey of primal journey of following Jesus no matter what. And I think there's a way to do it, and I've seen leaders do it, but it's definitely disruptive to come to experience a new and fresh way, and then have to figure out how to bring that back into the life of a congregation.
As you guys were describing this just now, the words that came to mind were but. I know I've had these thoughts like, but people tell me we need to improve our, online streaming, or but we need to keep our meetings shorter, or but we need a new youth person or whatever, you know what I mean? But we need this, but we need that. And that's a lot of pressure that pastors carry. And so that was part of what I was thinking. And then the other part related to that is it is interesting how so much of the expectation that's put on us are the kinds of things that, okay, if you really got down to it, you could come up with step 1, step 2, step 3 in order to achieve the things that people are expecting pastors and leaders to do, right? But then actual transformation is not a step 1, step 2, step 3 kind of a thing, I think. What do you guys think about that?
I think it depends. Jesus meets us where we're at, and so for each of us, it's not so much a step for everybody, and we're all at the same pace. But there is a compelling invitation of what your next step is to more fully entering life with God. And so I like to think that a leader's job is to help people identify what that step is, and then give them the support and encouragement to take that next step.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and I think there's a challenge in like a typical sermon where you're speaking to a number of people, because you can't really figure out what an individual person's next step is. Though sometimes I think there are congregational next steps. Here's what we need to do if we want to continue to exist as the people of God in this space. Here's what it looks like for us. Here's our next step. So I do think it has to be not multisensory, but like different form factors where there's large group setting, one-on-one spiritual guidance, companionship, where there's a lot of ability to dig in a little bit more to the nitty-gritty of what does this actually look like for you, because it's going to look different for you than it does for you based on your age, the neighborhood you live in, what kind of vocation you have in the world. So I think it involves more there's a lot more interpersonal work to be done. And I think there's not, everyone doesn't have the same next step, though. I think anything that can be done to move from a closed fist posture to like an open-handed posture, recognizing that there is a next step to take. Your eyes are open to the world, your heart is open to the possibilities of what God is speaking to you, and then your hands are open and willing to take a next step. I think that might be one of the hardest jobs of a pastor, is to move people from a closed off posture to an open posture. Especially, I feel like we're in a cultural moment where what a lot of people are looking for is certainty, or they're looking for like an affirmation of that their biases are correct, confirmation bias. When I think what we find when we read the Gospels is almost the opposite of that. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know I've read, and this is true, that like Jesus asks more questions than he answers. So like the God of the universe is deeply curious about humans and about the world, and asks more questions than provides answers. And that's just the posture of Jesus in the Gospels, is moving about, seeing people as an individual, not just kind of like lumping them in with a group, and dealing very closely in close proximity with the interpersonal issues of the day, as well as the socio-political issues of the day. But it's gritty, and it's requires a lot that is different than just kind of reading off prepared words or reciting memorized words to a group of people.
That's great. I think you guys use the Enneagram in your teaching as well. And different people have different opinions on the Enneagram. Some are all in, like, oh, it's so helpful, and some are like, not the Enneagram again. I'd love for you to talk about how how you I guess bring the Enneagram into this experience, and what's the difference between using it as like a personality quiz versus a formation tool.
I think there's a popular version of Enneagram, and then there's a more serious use of it as a tool for formation. And I'm from a mental health background, and that system was developed by psychiatrists to try and understand the patterns in human beings, sort of distortions of their of reality, the things we struggle with. So we use the Enneagram, the language of the Enneagram, not so much to look at someone else and try and figure out what their type is, but really giving us language to talk about, why do I do what I do? Why do I tend to have these certain distortions? Why am I so jealous and envious of people? Why is that driving me? And then how can God meet with me and help me see myself, God, and others more accurately, so that I'm not suffering so much needlessly by being driven by these distortions.
That's good. Dave, what do you think?
I've been kind of navigating conversations about the Enneagram. I learned about it like 20 years ago, maybe, in a church context, where it was a little bit more of like the social quiz, like, oh, what are you? Here's what I am. What are you? And, oh, that makes sense. And at some point, after kind of reading a number of books about it, teaching through it with groups of people, I stopped telling people what I would type as, just because I felt like what I saw happening was that and this is more on the social quiz side of the Enneagram, like it's used as a shortcut for relationships, or all of a sudden it's like, oh, here's what I can expect from you, rather than just kind of actually allowing us each to be. It almost restricts our humanity and the fluidity of how we show up in our personality. But I've continued to find it incredibly helpful on a personal level, introspective level. I think it's a really helpful framework for looking at some of those things that are way below the surface or just below the surface that I try to avoid whenever possible. But sometimes you need some kind of tool or framework to help you look in a little bit deeper. So I'll talk about it socially or relationally, but not in the ways that often that I used to, where it was like, oh, what are you? And then all the people who type as fives, you all get together and talk about being fives. And then we'll all look at you and know that you're the people who are going to do this, this, and this. And there's the people we should ask for help, because that's all they want to do. It becomes a strange way of dividing people up. But can maintain its I found it that it maintains its helpfulness and usefulness as an introspective tool.
That's interesting, because I mean, I have found it helpful in terms of understanding people. For me, as an Enneagram 9, understanding 8s, I'm like, okay, this is why this person ticks me off so much. But also, go ahead, Mark.
Oh, there's also, I think, well, a couple things. The Enneagram's meant to describe a person's habitual patterns of thinking, feeling, and responding to life. And so self-awareness is critical for spiritual formation. If when I know what's arising for me and or am aware of it, I can decide if I want to go with my default reactions and responses or choose differently. And it used to be the accusation was that Enneagram had no evidence-based foundation and things like that. That's actually changing. Daniel Siegel, a leading brain researcher and teacher, has actually spent 20 years with the Enneagram community looking at the connections between neuroscience and neurobiology and emotions and personality pattern. So that's an exciting new horizon. But I've used it a lot in terms of helping people, awareness of personality, to help people identify spiritual disciplines and practices that help them integrate and help them grow.
That's great.
A spiritual discipline or practice that's really helpful to one person might not be as helpful to someone else. So I have a bit of concern when, a church or a leader says, we're all going to do this spiritual discipline and it's going to change our lives. There's each of us comes to the invitation of Jesus in our lives with some existing patterns, and certain practices will help us more than others. So
that's good. I would love to know, Mark, I know you got to take off in a few minutes, so we're going to finish this conversation here. I would love to know, what are you guys still learning? How are you continuing to be transformed? Like, what's that formation edge, so to speak, for each of you? Dave, maybe why don't you share first?
Yeah, I think I'm sitting a lot with, and I'm reading a lot with, and seeing a lot and feeling the fractures of our world. I talked about it a little bit earlier. And it feels like I am surrounded by shards that are sharp and dangerous and risky. And there's a piece of me that has retreated because I don't want to keep on getting cut and hurt. So trying to figure out, like, what does it look like to be a person of hope in a fractured world is a question I'm slowly working through. I know quick answers that are probably, some of them are the right answers, but they haven't quite settled at the deep enough level for me. So I'm wrestling with that. Like, it's easier for me to read books. In our reading list, we have everything from nonfiction to fiction to movies, and it's easier for me to come up with the stories, fiction or nonfiction, that are the painful, broken examples of division and fracturing, the dismantling of the things that we used to trust as our foundations. It's easier for me to come up with that list than it is the stories of kind of hope and joy. So figuring out, what does it mean to exist in both worlds? Because it is just one world. It's a world that is filled with love, joy, peace, and patience, and kindness, and goodness, and faithfulness, and gentleness, and self-control, as well as fractures, and these shards of painful, sharp spaces. So really just trying to figure out how to hold those two together, because they both exist in the world that God created very good. So that's probably my learning edge a little bit, is just like how to hold those things together, rather than dwell in what seems like the current moment of reality.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Mark, how about you?
I've just been through a season of really confronting my ruptures in relationship and my long-standing resentments. And I'm really grateful that I've gotten some pretty incredible freedom in letting go of resentments, forgiving, and things like that. I think my learning edge is, I'm in middle age.
I heard when you're in your 50s, like you and me, we're like freshman old people.
yeah, that's what it feels like.
Yeah, I know.
And so, really facing my limitations, and I've been, I've been driven by I've been driven by a lot of things, a lot of good things, but I've also been driven by other things besides love, things like insecurity and ego. And so learning to do good for the right reasons instead of as fuel for my separated self is kind of where I'm at right now. And learning to be not so driven. I mean, Dave knows this because he's been a friend and on my board. I've been in a mess of existential crisis for a few years. And I feel like I'm coming out of it, but I can see there's a lot of potential growth for me to just learning to be at peace with myself and walk intimately with a sense of God's presence in a way that puts me at ease.
I love that. And, knowing you, Mark, and I'm sure you too, Dave, I'm sure you bring your whole self into this learning process with the students that you'll be working with. So I love that. Let me ask one more question. If people want to find out more about each of you and the work that you guys are doing and this particular cohort as well, where could they go?
For me, markscandrette.com or reimagine.org. And then this cohort got started based on one of my books called Practicing the Way of Jesus. It came out in 2011. So that's a good place to go for kind of a general orientation. And then I had one follow-up book that you mentioned earlier, Marcus, that I think it'd be a good example of the kinds of things we support students to create. My book on the Beatitudes called The Ninefold Path of Jesus.
I'll point people to our conversation about that as well. Dave, how about you?
Yeah, I think Fuller's going to have great resources on this cohort coming up, and then Mark and I are working now on kind of in relationship with this cohort content, like how do we put it out in different forms? So we're working on a Substack. We have some ideas for a podcast. So I think that's going to be happening soon. where we start to roll out some of these conversations in different ways that make sense of the time we live in. So I think just kind of paying attention to Fuller will host some of those things, and then we'll be sharing about some of those things as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Love it. Well, thank you for great conversation. Mark, great to hang out with you virtually here. Dave, great to meet you. Maybe we'll meet in person sometime. That would be really awesome. And just really grateful for you guys and the good work that you guys are doing.
Yeah, good to be with you, Marcus.
Well, thanks for listening. Hey, if this episode was helpful to you, I hope that you'll share it with another leader who needs to hear it. And if you're looking to deepen your theological thinking, sharpen your leadership, and join a cohort of leaders who are wrestling with the same questions that you are, I want to invite you to explore Fuller Theological Seminary's Doctor of Ministry program. As a Fuller D-Min grad myself, it was transformational for my ministry. You can check it out at fuller.edu/dmin. The music that you hear on this podcast is by my good friend and partner in ministry, Derek Rice. You can find his worship music on all of your favorite streaming platforms. Well, thank you so much for being part of this community, and I will see you next time here on Spiritual Life and Leadership.